Welcome, Wargamers, to the mythic fields of Elpis as we continue our exploration of the Legacy of Atmos setting with one of the newest factions to arrive to the battlefront. And I'm, of course, talking about the Maxxadons. This is a faction that I have personally been highly anticipating because, quite frankly, nothing's as cool as, magical elephant people. But in this video, we're going to talk about who they are, what they want, their history, and really how they fit into the greater scheme of things within the setting. Before we begin, I just want to shout out, if you're interested in this lore, you want to know how they work and be a part of game development for the Maxxadons as a whole, be sure to sign up for the Discord in the description down below. That's where we handle all of the Legacy of Atmos stuff. We're building a fantastic community there, and right now we have lore contests going on. We're going to be having game tournaments and stuff in the future, so go ahead, sign up, get connected. Great people all around. So if you're new to Legacy of Atmos and you haven't been keeping up in the Discord and all kind of stuff, it's perfectly reasonable to ask, who are the Maxxadons? Well, they are a truly ancient race, and they are the offspring of the Eldion of Wrath, Krox-Thul, and the Eldion of Spirituality, Viria. Eldians sort of being like the gods of the setting. They create sentient life wherever they want, and so they can kind of combine their powers to make various factions, and so you get the personalities of all the gods as they mingle together. In this case, we have Wrath and Spirituality, and so what does that make? Well, we're going to explore it more here in a little bit, but as far as a physical description of them, these are large bipedal elephant-type figures. They're able to move through the ether itself, travel great distances at a whim, and are bound together by a powerful, powerful sense of magic. During the War of Creation, which is sort of like the mythic age of this setting, back when the gods were all fighting one another, the Maxxadons originally sided with Krox-Thul, the Eldion Titan of Wrath. Their combination of brute strength and spiritual intensity, that's what you get when you combine, a god of spirituality and wrath, it made them extremely efficient and loyal offspring. They could come into an area, devastate any populace that stood against them just with a coordinated attack of magic assaults and huge, sweeping weapons and martial pride, all this kinds of stuff. Well, after the War of Creation, and out of fear of what they would become, Krox-Thul initiated a millennia-long plan to slowly dwindle the Maxxadon race into only the most brutal and loyal among them. And it wasn't like outright genocide. It wasn't like, okay, these are my custom-crafted soldiers, they destroyed all the enemies, and now I need to get rid of them. Instead, he's like, well, what if we just winnow them away, and so we get down to the ones that are really more focused on me rather than the other god of spirituality. I want cold killers. I don't want people who, have a sense of things. It was during this time that Navid, one of the Grand Diviners of the Elrin branch of Maxxadons, which is sort of like a small sect of them, they just have their own little religious groups and spiritual focuses with their own leaders, that kind of thing. Well, this hero, Navid, discovers this plot. And the Elrins, being considered a highly honorable and spiritual-esque offshoot of the Maxxadons, really couldn't stand there and let it happen. Their entire race is being kind of sifted, so only the least intelligent and the most aggressive of them exist, but then there's this little off-branch that sees which way the wind is blowing and is like, this is not cool. So Navid, fearing for the very existence of his people, secretly began to search for a planet within the outer reaches of the cosmos, far from the rule of Krox-Thul, and it was this search that led them to discover the Soul Star god Athel. Now, we've talked about this. Athel went far, far away to go set up a new Earth, try to raise sentient beings to enlightenment so that collectively they could all fight back against the evil Eldian Titans, the dark guys who basically ripped through the Civil War pretty well. Well, Athel, he just sees what used to be, the hounds of his enemy show up on his doorstep. He immediately attacks them. He's like, we gotta kill these guys, make sure no one knows where they went, gotta hide the planet, maybe have to start all over again. He's just very sure that this is the end for him. But the sheer spiritual might of Navid allowed him to basically just take the punch. Like a god smacked him in the face and he just kind of took it. Their fight lasted for days, and eventually Navid did succumb to the Soul Star god's might. Essentially, Athel broke him. And when he broke, he kneeled and basically explained the whole situation. When Naveed was, defeated, Athel peered into the far corners of his mind and saw the hidden plans of Crax al Thul and Naveed's own desperate gamble to escape. So essentially, he's like, oh, you're not an enemy, or you're not a scouting force. You guys are like refugees. And since Athel is such a compassionate entity, he gave him a choice. You'd be allowed to take 1,000 of the Elrond Maxxadons to populate this new gigaplanet on Elpis on one condition. Knowledge of the greater cosmos must be kept hidden from all except those original 1,000. And the Elrond Maxxadons on Elpis must help Athel in shaping the denizens of the planet to be the highest spiritual versions of themselves. Now, there was a sacrifice here because there's more than 1,000 Elrond Maxxadons, so you need to winnow out your species a little bit more, but I will give you safe haven in exchange for you helping me with this project. These people, these experiments that Athel is generating on this planet of Elpis, they're going to need guidance, and so who's better than some of the most divine spiritual beings in existence? Now, Naveed, essentially, he just immediately agrees. He's like, yes, please. And he takes this proposal, he saves 1,000 of his people from certain death, and he splits those 1,000 into 4 separate colonies of 250 Maxxadons each. Now, again, these guys are colossally huge. I mean, compared to a human, they're massive, they eat a lot. Like, they need to have their own little environment. So they split up. Now we have 4 different kinds of Maxxadons on Elpis. We are just focused on those that followed kind of from the core branch, the Elrond type. Now, this all happened about 5,000 years before our current timeline in the story setting. And the small colony of Maxxadons, one of them landed close to the Telnar Forest, which is what kind of the main story arc of Legacy of Atmos is in right now. And these Maxxadons have turned into a thriving civilization of spirituality and culture, reaching numbers in the tens of thousands. So they had their own massive population boom. This specific order that's located near to the Telnar Forest is led by a Maxxadon by the name of Devanshi, one of the grand diviners within the Elrond Maxxadons, and one of the 7 remaining quote-unquote old ones from that original 250-person colony. So 5,000 years old, looking good. Now, despite their edicts on kind of the restriction of knowledge about the greater cosmos, the Maxxadons in this region are loosely aware through ancient texts and their own religious practices that there are other groups of their kind within the world. Devanshi is known to them as their grand spiritual leader, although most generally do not know of his origins or how long he's been alive. Nor do they understand the ancestors' dark history throughout the cosmos, so you have this isolated, very chaste spiritual group that doesn't understand, well, we used to be the bad guys. They can't comprehend that. And so these Maxxadons live their lives from birth to death on a personal quest for spiritual enlightenment. Remember, Athel's rule was you have to help foster enlightenment and attainment of those things on my planet. And so they put that discipline into the next generations themselves. So that original 250 that made up this colony focused on spiritual discipline to the generation below them. Why? Because that generation would need to interact with all of Athel's experiments. And it just keeps building and building from there. And this idea of spiritual enlightenment, to understand the nature of reality and your place in it, sort of is like the penultimate, goal of their religion. Those who reach this certain level of enlightenment are simply called diviners. These diviners have access to an inner magic, which gives them access to elemental abilities, and they can harness the power within Crealis on the planet, so they just basically can zap straight from the batteries rather than having to do complex spells like humanity has to do. And unlike humans, they don't actually burn or destroy the Crealis in its use, they instead cycle energy through it, almost like it's a conduit rather than a battery. So bringing us up to the more current timeline, the council of these Maxxadons near the Telnar Forest is just finding out, hey, High Lord Godry Ronin is marching a huge army into the Telnar Forest. That's, of course, where our, Legacy of Atmos story arc is right now, is that Telnar crusade. And Devanshi is worried, because surely he thinks that Athel would come in and stop the massacre of his favorite creation, the actual Tellus Commune. But Athel has been distracted of late and silent for months and years at a time. So with no word from Athel, Da Vinci is forced to send Javu, a younger Grand Diviner, now 90 years old, and a contingent of their strongest warriors into the Telnar conflict. Javu's mission is simple: prevent the destruction of the southern soul tree of the Telnar forest and convince the High Lords of the humans and the daughters of Athel to resolve the conflict in peace. Now that is your very basic understanding and an introduction to this faction, but let's take a minute and talk about why I think they're so cool. Why did we design these guys to be this way? Well, fundamentally the Maxxadons have a very unique story to tell. That of both being a guardian and protector and teacher on the spiritual side of things now, but also formerly being executioners of the bad guys, so to speak, as well as then refugees once they realized they were being destroyed piece by piece. And there may come a day where that code of silence regarding their origins has to fall apart, but it is not this day. And so as far as all the leadership and stuff like that we're currently engaging with understands, well, we've always been on Elpis. This is just where we formed. It's part of, Athel's plan. They don't necessarily revere him as a deity, but maybe a part of him factors into their beliefs in terms of, creation, spirituality, discipline, that kind of thing. I'm sure they have an immense amount of respect for the Tellus Commune, who we've said in many videos are set up to be like the control kind of power that keeps all of Athel's experiments in line. Well, Athel's gone. The Tellus Commune is really struggling to know what to do with humanity, this race that has reached technological advancements in a very sharp rate, but not the spiritual and, philosophical heights that should have preceded it. They're not enlightened, but they now have weapons of destruction that are good enough to take out, the ones running the experiment, the Tellus Commune. So, there's a problem, and the Tellus Commune itself doesn't know what to do with this. They're kind of frozen. That's actually why the Tellus Crusade started, is because they froze. They've been waiting so long for Athel to speak back to them, but he just isn't. And what's interesting is that his, representative on the planet, the Tellus Commune, is doing basically nothing except defending their own land because they don't know what to do with humanity. And then you have the Maxxadons being like, well, some of us are older than the Tellus Commune, right? We came here first, and so we know what needs to be done. This needs to get shut down. Basically just we're going to intercede and be the peacekeepers. And that spawns, rather than just being nosy and not minding their own business, that spawns from this place of we were here and we were given a mission. This entire planet, this entire civilization, it's all our second chance that we didn't necessarily deserve from Athel. We're not going to mess this up. And so they have this very unique motivation of, their absolute highest leaders understand the bigger picture and saying, y'all need to stop squabbling, right? Because in the grand scheme of the cosmos, the fight between Atmos Federation and the Tellus Commune is very small. But of course, no one in the story can understand that. That's the point. And so how do you explain to people that you see the bigger picture in a cosmos and eon-long story between good and evil and all these kinds of things, and instead you're just trying to get a guy to stop walking in the woods, right? All of that story is just trying to say, hey, Ronan, stop. Now, from a modeling perspective, this is one of the best factions I think that we've ever made, just because I love the models. They're fantastic. They're low model count, even though it says tens of thousands live in the Elrin tribe here near the Tellus Commune. The truth is most of them are not warriors per se. And Elpis is meant to be like a gigaplanet, meaning it's just quite massive, so 10,000 is not as much real estate as you might think. They don't take up a lot of room. They've been incredibly fun to think about and write stories for, so if you have any questions about the Maxxadons and you'd like to get a hold of the models, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to share them with you. We'll have them up on the web store here pretty soon as far as print on demand and STL formats, and I can't wait to dive into their story more as the Tellus Crusade unravels. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.